On today's show, the Hawks lose at home to the Denver Nuggets in a game that featured an explosion from Bogdan Bogdanovic and also the ejection of Trae Young and many more things. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1606 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Check it all out at PrizePicks right now. And also, make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Find us and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify on the audio side, as well as YouTube on the video side. And today's show, we'll focus on what became the sixth loss in the last 7 games for the Hawks. Unfortunately, if you are a Hawks fan, of course, the Hawks are now 9-13 on the season. They're not playing all that well at this point in time. And also, they are now 4 games under 500 for the first time in almost 2 years. They started out very well in this game, actually. Led by as many as 11 points in the first quarter, up by 8 at the end of the first. And then gave the lead back by the time they got to halftime, and then got blown out of the water, honestly, in the third quarter. Trey Young got ejected near the end of the third quarter, which we'll come back to later on in the podcast. The biggest bright spot was Bogdanovic, who actually had 40 points and a career-best offensive night for him. Led a comeback. The Hawks were actually in this game to the very end, but they ended up losing by a final score of 129-122. And we'll get into all of what transpired here. So if you're new to the podcast, what we'll do at the top of the show is kind of go bigger about what transpired in this game. Then we'll kind of dig into the details, some observations throughout the middle of the podcast. At the end of the show, we'll talk about the players and how they all fared individually in this game. But of the lead story, beyond just the result itself, DeAndre Hunter was actually out of action in this game with what the Hawks were calling right quad tendon soreness. So that left the Hawks down their starting forwards, both Jalen Johnson, who's still out, of course, at this point in time, plus Hunter, and that left the Hawks small and left the Hawks without a lot of defensive punch in this game. Atlanta actually ended up starting Garrison Matthews at the 3 in this game, which we'll talk about more later on. They brought up Seth Lundy from College Park. He didn't play in this game, but there's some insurance there for Hunter. And, obviously, going into the season, if you told me that the Hawks were going to be without Hunter and Johnson for a length of time, they would be rough defensively at the very least, which was certainly the case in this spot. Big picture, though, the Hawks were underdogs at home in this game without Johnson and Hunter by about 3 points, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Actually, the biggest home underdog the Hawks have been this season. And, of course, they lost this game. But they're not, by the way, 3-7 at home is kind of unacceptably bad for Atlanta, even when you kind of factor in all the context. But in this loss, I will have to kind of lead with the side of the floor, which I thought the Hawks were actually, the bigger problem in. And that was, of course, the defense. So they had a 131 defensive rating in this game, at least in the competitive portion of this contest. They allowed 75 points in the middle 2 quarters. That kind of swung the game. Actually, kind of a weird stat overall. The Hawks won the first quarter and the fourth quarter by a combined 18 points in a 7-point loss. That's tough to do. That means you got smoked in the middle of the game, and they definitely did by double figures in both quarters. But Denver shot the ball very well in this game, 53% from the floor and 41% from 3. They got to the line 29 times, they had 64 points in the paint, 19 second chance points. It was really good across the board from Denver's offense in this game against the porous Hawks defense. Atlanta did force a lot of turnovers this game. Actually led to 25 points on turnovers. That's actually a pretty impressive amount. But that was really the only positive area for the defense, at least according to the numbers. I guess they kind of held Jokic in reasonable check. He had 25 points, 9 assists. That's kind of very typical for Jokic in a lot of ways. But everybody else other than Porter Jr. kind of got loose for the Nuggets in this game. And again, we'll talk about it more later on in the podcast, but just personnel-wise, and that doesn't explain all of it, but the Hawks just don't have personnel right now on defense, in particular on the wings. They're very small, and Denver is, number one, huge, and number two, excellent on offense. Like, when they have their full complement of player, which they did in this game, it's probably the best starting 5 in the league. They just won the title last year, all that stuff. Not an excuse, it's just kind of the reality of what's going to happen there, and the Hawks were small and overmatched on defense throughout this contest. On offense, kind of a weird, nuanced game on this side of the floor, I would say. So a 122 offensive rating for Atlanta, which is a pretty good number. In fact, it's a very good number. Denver is not great defensively, but they're average. They're solid. They're not bad at all. And that's a good number against anybody, really, if you're the Hawks, especially when you factor in that Trae didn't play his normal amount, only 26 minutes from Trae because he got ejected in this game. And without Hunter and without Johnson, that you can't really ask for much more than this from the offense. The middle of the game was not particularly good, I'll say that. And they were carried by Bogey, also, which is important context, but big picture, sort of on the whole offensively, they did enough to be competitive and to potentially sneak away with the win in this game. Bogey is the big story with 10 threes and 40 points. We'll talk about him more later on, but crazy performance from him. He was red hot the entire game, really. But other than Bogey, the shooting was not very good. So the rest of the team shot 7 of 27 from 3 in this game, and that includes a dismal 1 of 10 combined for AJ Griffin, Garrison Matthews, and Wes Matthews. They're pure supporting wing pieces in the absence of Hunter and Johnson. Because obviously the rest of the minutes on the wing went to Bay and Bogey, who always play and play big roles. But the guys who don't always play a ton were basically filling in, quote unquote, for the combination of Johnson and Hunter. Those 3 guys combined to shoot 2 of 11 from the floor and 1 of 10 from 3. That's tough. The Hawks actually did end up shooting the ball solidly from the floor. 46% from the floor in this game, 39% from 3. It did flip in the middle of the game, though. The Hawks were well below 40% in the middle of the game, and they were red hot in the start and the end of this one. Took care of the ball, though. 10 turnovers is a very good number. They didn't shoot well at the rim. Outside of the first few minutes of the game, they actually were 16 of 30 from the rim in this game. But, they weren't perfect. I think Murray had some positives and negatives. He was kind of course, the focal point with Young out of the game. I thought Trae, when he was played pretty well on offense. Sadiq Bey was fine in this game. They got nothing from the wings, and Bogey was obviously incredible. But honestly, I think the Hawks coming into the night kind of had to have a not just solid, not just good, but like an excellent offensive game to win. Because if you remove the defensive personnel that they lost without Hunter and Johnson against Denver at full strength, and yes, it was at home, but it wasn't like it was a raucous Monday night crowd by Atlanta standards. So all that said, they need to be better than a B minus, B plus on defense. On offense in this game, and they weren't. So it was still defensively. That's where they lost the game, but that was also predictable given who was not playing and who was playing on the other side of the floor for Denver. So the Hawks have now lost 6 of the last 7, and that is brutal for sure. It is important context to note that like 5 of those losses were against teams that are really good in situations where the Hawks were underdogs. They lost in Boston, they lost in Cleveland, they lost in Milwaukee, in Philadelphia, and then tonight at home, yes, but against the reigning champions at full strength. So none of those games are bad losses. But I will certainly also note at the same time that you don't want to go 0-5 in those games. Plus, they lost a game to Brooklyn at home that they probably should have won. So going 1-6 in this stretch without Jalen Johnson is not what the doctor ordered by any means. Should they be 2-5? Probably, maybe even 3-4. But they aren't, and that leads to frustration. I think Quinn was kind of upbeat after the game. In fact, I transcribed some of the quotes on Twitter and posted them, and some Hawks fans were like bothered by the sort of the moral victory aspect of the thing. And Quinn didn't say that, but he talks about being proud of the team, and I get why he said that. Like the Hawks were resilient in this game; they played all the way to the finish. They were down big in the fourth quarter the entire way, and then kind of fought back to get into the game. But at the same time, it's the NBA, and you can't just write that off. So. Before the game, if you asked me if the Hawks were to win tonight, I would have probably told you they would lose more often than not. That was the absence of the guys they were losing, plus the just some respect for the reigning champions in Denver. But it's another game that the Hawks were not huge underdogs in that they didn't win. I talked about this a little bit on the show on Friday, but the theme of this season for me so far as like top level, is that the Hawks have not won the games that they could have stolen against good teams. We'll touch on this more probably tomorrow on the podcast and maybe in the future, but they did win 2 games in the first week and a half of the season in impressive fashion against Milwaukee and against Minnesota that were games where they weren't favored. They were kind of, the good, positive, kind of somewhat surprising wins. And ever since then, the Hawks have beaten the bad teams that they played, but they have not really gotten any of these wins that you kind of need to get over the course of an NBA season to kind of bake wins and get on the positive track. So at 9-13, nobody's happy. I can assure you of that. Tonight in a vacuum, not a bad loss, but also it's not just a vacuum all the time. Even if someone who's trying to preach nuance on this podcast all the time, it isn't just a vacuum. Losses compound on themselves, and we'll have more on this later on in the podcast, but not one where the Hawks can be, down to the dumps too badly based on this one performance, but still you just keep losing, and those things kind of mount on you, and it is tough sometimes to be positive in the face of all of that. All right, we'll have more on this game coming up, including how this game unfolded in the middle of the game, as well as the ending, player stuff, and more. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest DFS platform in North America and also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you have to do is PrizePicks is pick 2 to 6 players and then choose will they actually have more or less than their projections in a ton of different categories across sports. And you can win up to 25 times the money on your entries. Also, there's combo projections across sports that can allow you to have 2 or more different players from different sports, different leagues involved in those projections. And they have a huge selection of sports and stat types not offered anywhere else. They have projections on the NFL, NBA, NHL, PGA, and many more. And they have the reboot policy as well at PrizePicks. They are the only DFS platform that has an injury insurance policy. I've really enjoyed checking out PrizePicks all year long. I'm digging with them all the time. And NFL season, college football season, as bowl season's coming up right now, NBA, of course, college basketball, etc. The experience there is easy, it's fun, and I highly recommend it at PrizePicks. And what you need to do right now is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100. One more time, that is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Check out DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports, and it's made easy with PrizePicks. All right, we'll dive in now to all of what transpired in this particular game. And at the top, I will address a question I got a lot of, and that is basically, why did Garrison Matthews start for the Hawks in this game? So Garrison played 17 minutes. We'll talk about how the way he played later on. But ironically, this is his first start as a Hawk since he arrived last season. And pretty interestingly, his first NBA start since he actually was in Houston, and his last start came against the Hawks, actually, on April 10th of 2022 in a meaningless game. So that's interesting. I did not love starting Garrison. It doesn't enrage me like it does with some Hawks fans, and Quinn kind of talks about how like starting doesn't really matter that much. All that said, but I will say this first: not a lot of options without Hunter and Johnson. That's the first thing. And I think obviously the thinking was to keep Bogey in his typical role. And just for throwing this out there, I know I'm certainly one that admits that I am not as much invested in who starts and as I am and who finishes and who plays more minutes. And Bogey played 36 minutes in this game, so it wasn't as if they underutilized Bogey. He couldn't really play more than he played realistically in this game. Personally, I would have probably started Bogey, or I would have started Okongwu, which is interesting because I know that would have been kind of out of left field. But given that Denver is huge in the front court, they have Michael Porter Jr. is ostensibly the small forward. He's like a legit 6'10", 6'11". Aaron Gordon is not that tall, but he's definitely a beefy, physical player. If there was ever a night to start Okongwu and Capella, it would have been tonight. And they did play that group in the fourth quarter, which we'll talk about later on in the podcast. But, again, it doesn't bother me that much. They did play Griffin in this game. Wes Matthews is more of a guy they want to keep the minutes limited for. So, in the end, does it matter that they started Garrison? Not a lot. And actually, the Hawks were up in the first quarter. They played pretty well with the starters in this game. But that's all I have on that topic for now. The Nuggets were really sitting a lot of players at Trae defensively. Multiple bodies they were showing and blitzing and all that stuff. And Trae actually had a great situation early in the first quarter with 3 possessions in a row where he and Clint Capella teamed up for great plays. So Trae had a great no-look pass to Capella for a dunk. A good reminder, by the way, of what the Hawks did not have at their disposal on Friday against Philadelphia, where he is, that passing is kind of jumping off the screen a lot of the time. Had another nice pass to Capella on the next possession, and then Capella actually threw like a stunningly nice backdoor pass to Trae for a layup on the next trip. That was kind of a fun sequence for the offense. Atlanta led early on and really led the entire first quarter. Situationally, rotation-wise, it was 9 guys that played in this game. No real surprises. Griffin did play after 4 DNPs in a row. He had the least minutes and did not play that well, but he was back in the lineup. Wes Matthews, Okongwu, and then, of course, Bogey as the 6th man, as he basically always is. The Hawks had a nice run mid-quarter, 11-4 to go up by 7 points. I thought that was the best stretch of the entire game from DeJounte Murray, who ended up with 21 points in this game. But I thought he was aggressive in that stretch in a good way. A pull-up 3, got to the rim a couple times, and then the rest of the game kind of settled into like more of the frustrating like mid-range passivity, all that stuff. So kind of a tale of 2 kind of situations for Murray across the board here. But the Hawks were up by 8 at the end of the first quarter. They made 6 threes. They had 9 assists and 1 turnover in the first quarter. They played great. And the middle of the game was not as kind. I did think that Trae kind of annihilated Zeke Naji in isolation early in the second quarter. But I thought, once the bench came in and got settled in a little bit more, it was not fantastic. AJ, I thought, struggled in his first stint. He missed a rotation. He got blown by Julian Strother. He missed a extra pass that would have been an easy 3-point attempt. Just not playing very well. There was a very funny sequence in the middle quarter where Wes Matthews and Garrison Matthews took 2 back-to-back just terrible threes from the same spot. Wes did draw a charge, though, to offset his, but kind of a funny moment from your supporting players. The Hawks were down by the middle of the quarter, unfortunately. Julian Strother, who I've always liked a lot. Kevin Chouinard of Fox.com likes him even more than I do. But he had a big first half as a rookie for the Nuggets to kind of keep them alive while their best players were kind of easing into the game, let's say. Bogey played a ton of minutes after he came in off of the bench. And then Denver had the first of 2 big runs. So a 13-4 push by the Nuggets to close the half. And the Hawks scored 4 points in their last 8 possessions in the first half. Kind of rough there. They cooled off offensively after the hot start, despite Trae and Bogey having 30 combined in that first half. And then it got settled in. So the big downturn was the third quarter, especially early in the third quarter. The Hawks actually opened the third quarter 4 of 16 from the field and got down by 20 points after about 8 minutes. They scored 9 points in 8 minutes. Early on, the shot quality was not terrible, I didn't think, but they couldn't make any shots, and then after they started missing shots, they started to press, and it spiraled, I would say. And also the Nuggets made a bunch of shots, and credit to them. But needless to say, I talked about this a little bit more earlier, but I'll talk about it more specifics now. A lineup with Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Garrison Matthews, and Saddiq Bey is not likely to stop anyone, especially stop an elite offense like the one Denver has. So the Nuggets had a 144 offensive rating in the first 2.5 quarters of this game. And the Hawks just could not afford to have a bad shooting stretch. And from the start of the second quarter to the middle of the third quarter, they were 14 of 39 from the field. That just couldn't happen. So, again, they kind of had to be, I don't know about perfect, but they had to be very good offensively in this game. And they were good for most of the night, but they were not great at the entire game, and that was part of the problem. Now, Bogey tried his darndest to keep the Hawks in this game kind of by himself. He had 11 points in a row in the third quarter to kind of keep the game on the rails. It was kind of teetering to being like a blowout at that point, and Bogey went nuclear. And then, though, the wild sequence in the third quarter happened. So this resulted in 3 technical fouls, including an ejection to Trey Young. So Trey got called for a T for wanting a call that he did not get. And I thought it was a foul. You see the replay, I'm sure, if you listen to this podcast, but if you haven't, I would encourage you to find it. I thought it was a foul. It was not crazy, no call, but I thought it was a foul. After the game, by the way, Lauren Williams of the AJC got to be the pool reporter for if there's an ejection, something like that, the official has to talk to some designated reporter. It's usually Lauren in Atlanta. And Lauren asked Ben Taylor, who's the official crew chief, why the foul was not called. And he basically said that Young initiated marginal contact by clamping his arm his arm up and under the defender's arm, so there was no legal contact by the defender. I don't love that, but it is what it is. Now the controversy. So, Trae gets a T. And on film, and even in the building, it didn't seem like it was a very obvious why. But Taylor said, and I quote now from Lauren's pool report, quote, he received a warning, and Young continued to direct unsportsmanlike comments and then claps at the official, end quote. I don't know about that. It's interesting. We'll never know unless Trae tells us what he actually said. That's something you probably would have had to have heard courtside. But that got a technical foul, and then that obviously set Trae off. And then Quinn steps in. He starts arguing. He gets one too for being out on the floor too far, I suppose. And then I thought Igor Kozgov, the Hawks assistant coach, probably saved Quinn from being ejected. I have to admit, when I saw the ejection signal come in from the official, I thought they were ejecting Quinn and not Trae. But then Trae got teed up second time and got ejected. And I'm sure once he got the first one, he just kind of lost it, which is understandable. But anyway, that all resulted in 3 points for Denver in a game that became close later on, which is unfortunate, and also resulted in the Hawks' best player not being there in the fourth quarter. So they were already down 15-ish, 16 points, something like that. So they were probably going to lose this game anyway, I have to say. But that didn't help at all. By the way, in the third quarter, where the Hawks lost the quarter, Bogey had 11 points on 5 shots, and the rest of the team had 13 points on 20 shots, which kind of a microcosm of the game in some respects. In the fourth, it was basically desperation time the entire way, which is understandable because they were down a bunch of points. They tried the 2 center lineup, which they actually asked that about the game pregame to Quinn Snyder. I don't have the audio for you now on the podcast. If you want to listen to what Quinn said about the two centers before the game that I asked him, you can find that at patreon.com/BT Rowland. But he talks about how the fact, like, it's kind of I think he used the term necessity is the mother of invention, which kind of like they're doing that because they kind of have to right now. But I thought it was going to happen more in this game, honestly, than it did at the end. But they finally went to it in the fourth quarter, and they played it for 8 consecutive minutes by the end of this game. By the way, Murray, Bogey, and Bay and Okongwu all played the entire fourth quarter. They were trying to win this game. They were trying to steal this one, and they almost did. Murray had 5 points in a row, cut the lead down to 11. They were chipping away. Then Bogey got hot once again. So Capella got a steal. Bogey hit a 3 to cut the lead to 7 with about 2 minutes to go. And then Bogey hit 2 more threes, his 9th and 10th of the game, to get it down to 5. And then the Hawks forced a turnover with 32 seconds left and had a chance with the ball down 5. Now, obviously, they're still underdogs, down 5 with the ball. Bay got fouled at the line and missed a second free throw, which was a big swing. And then there was a scramble. The ball was out of bounds, and Quinn challenged it. It was not overturned, nor should it have been. It was a bad challenge in some respects. And they had to foul, and that was kind of it. But they won the fourth quarter by 10 points. They were right there. They never gave up, which again Quinn praised them for. Without Bogey going nuts, they lose this game by 15 probably, which or maybe even more than that. So keep that in mind. Like they kind of needed Bogey to go crazy to still lose this game by 7, and we're down by more than that for most of the fourth quarter. But they kept fighting, which I think is a admirable thing in this spot. But as I said before, that's not going to be enough all the time. They got to win some games, and we'll have more on that in the near future, I can assure you. Okay, with all that said, we'll have more on the player-by-player stuff in a second, but first, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NBA and NFL offers stay hot at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 in your pocket if your team wins. Beyond the awesome perks of signing up with FanDuel, they have all the stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space. They have over-unders, they have point spreads, they have money lines, player props, future bets, live betting, same-game parlays. It's all there at FanDuel. The app is safe, secure, easy to use, and they cover the entire range of sports at FanDuel. Of course, the NFL, NBA, college basketball, college football. They have the WNBA and MLB futures, especially right now. They have college, they have all kinds of college sports. They have golf, tennis, soccer. They have auto racing. They have MMA, boxing. It's all there at FanDuel. And they have tons of Hawks stuff as well, including the entire scope of stuff in advance of the next 2 games for the Hawks in Toronto on Wednesday and on Friday. And right now is the best possible time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and a partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn right now. Check out the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you will absolutely not want to miss. That is FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, we're going to go to the bench, but we're going to save Bogey for the very end of this discussion. So I'll start with AJ Griffin. So AJ played 9 minutes. Did not score, 2 points, 1 assist, 1 from the floor. I thought AJ struggled. And I said this on Twitter tonight. I don't want to make this as simple as it might sound, but I thought tonight was a good example of why AJ is not playing. Now, that's not me saying that I don't think he should play, because I've said numerous times I think the Hawks should be dedicating some minutes to AJ on a regular basis. And he had 4 DNPs in a row before this. I don't love that. But if you're looking for reasons, basketball reasons, present day, why he's not playing, they were there for you tonight. He didn't swing the ball a couple times defensively. It's kind of a mess for AJ right now. He's not playing with a lot of confidence. And yeah, you could certainly argue that maybe playing him more would give him confidence. I wouldn't argue with that. He played a 6-minute stint in the first half, and the second half is very quick. So, we'll see in the future. I'd like to see AJ play more sort of dedicatedly, but he's not been playing well either. So that's sort of a touchy both sides thing right now. But that's kind of what I have on that front today. Wes Matthews, 0-4 from 3, tough there, but got 5 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 points for Wes in 18 minutes. I thought he gave them a lot of defense, but offensively was kind of a mess in this one. So that's the downside with Wes Matthews, who is their best defensive option of the bench wings by a wide margin, but also is their worst offensive option. So you're kind of doing a little bit of both. Obviously AJ and even Garrison have more offensive juice than Wes Matthews does, but defensively he's kind of their backup 4 in tonight's game in a lot of ways, and was valuable there, but just didn't have it going on offense. Okongwu, 28 minutes, a lot of that at the 4 in the fourth quarter, but 7 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block for Onyeka. I thought he played okay. I thought the first half he had issues with Jokic, kind kind of went through him in a lot of ways. He's done pretty decent against Jokic in the past, but he was not very good against Jokic in this game. I thought he was actually pretty good at the 4, playing next to Capella in the fourth quarter, but I thought he was just okay in this one. We'll save Bogey for the end. Garrison Matthews, 17 minutes, 1-5 from 3, 1-5 from the floor, same shots. No rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, -9. I don't think Garrison played very well. I think he gives them a little bit of, hard-nosed defense. Not always great defense, but certainly is willing to get in there and mix it up. But it's tough to play him that many minutes. I will just be the first to say that. He's also kind of small at the 3 in particular. So I don't think he played great by any means. I would like to see a little bit more of AJ probably, but still a lack of great options is kind of the story that I would point to in this one. Saddiq Bey played 40 minutes. He kind of had to. He was their only healthy and available power forward in this game. So I thought he was fine. 16 points on 6-11 from the floor. He was 5 of 7 on 2s, 1-4 from 3, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. I thought Saddiq gave them solid minutes. Was not great, but was not bad either, and also was playing physically, and they kind of needed that in this game. Clint Capella, I thought was awesome in the first half, like awesome in his first stint in particular against Jokic. He was more ordinary after that, although I thought he played well in the fourth quarter as well. 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists for Clint with 1 steal. He was 6 of 11 from the floor and 2 of 2 from the free throw line in this game. He gave them good minutes, I thought. Trae, obviously got ejected. That's tough because, the games, they're probably going to lose anyway, but it would have been nice to have Trae around in the fourth quarter. 19.9 assists for Trae in 26 minutes. I thought he played very well offense, other than some turnovers that were a little bit ill-advised, but I thought he was in control for the most part offensively in this game. Defensively, not his best work. I thought it was notable to me that they actually had Trae defend Jamal Murray when they started with him in this game. That surprised me. Not a ton, but some. With DeJounte kind of being the guy who has the rep defensively, they went with Trae instead. But I thought Trae was okay when he was playing, and then obviously the early exit there. DeJounte, weird game. 38 minutes, 21 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists for DeJounte. 2 turnovers is pretty good in that large sample size of not turning the ball over. But efficiency-wise, he was not great. So he started this game off really aggressive, getting to the rim, and then he kind of stopped doing that. In fact, he was 5 of 15 on 2s. That's really bad. Obviously, some of that is him taking some tough shots, like the Raiders, but some of that's what he likes to do, unfortunately, in some respects. So he actually was 3 of 8 from 3, but only 2 free throw attempts, and the rim pressure stopped. Passing wise, he's just not the same as Trae. And I thought DeJounte was not particularly good after the first stint of the game. And then lastly, Bogey was brilliant, man. I mean, it's a shame it came in a loss, but just some numbers on Bogey, by the way, while we're here. He tied the franchise record for threes in a game with 10. The most he's set a new record for the franchise with 10 threes off the bench in a game. He scored 40 points on 25 shots, which is obviously excellent. Third most points by a Hawk in a bench role in history of the franchise, and it's been more than 4 decades since a Hawks bench player has had 40 points in a game, and that happened in this game. The only 2 guys who ever had more than 40 off the bench for the Hawks before this were Pete Maravich, pretty famous guy, and John Drew, who is like a very, very, very good all-time player. So pretty nice company there. And he was brilliant. I mean, obviously, everyone watched the game knows this. He just couldn't miss out for a while in this game. Also had 3 assists and 1 turnover. Very solid there. And he's capable of this. I've always said when he has it going, he's a special player. I think he might be, if not the favorite at this moment, to win 6th Man of the Year. He's certainly high on the list. For the season, after tonight, Bogey's averaging 17 points a game. And, by the way, almost 23 points per game, per 36 minutes, which is actually number 2 on the team behind only Trae. He's shooting 40% from 3 on the season. He's been elite efficiency-wise. If the Hawks were winning more games, he'd get more attention. But I think that Bogey is essentially a 6th starter. Bogey is a starter. For most teams in the league, Bogey's a starter. And on this team, I get why he doesn't start, because you have Trae and DeJounte. But when Bogey is healthy as he is right now, and Bogey's playing with the swagger that he's playing with right now, he is a starter. He's a top 100 player in the league. He's very good. And that was a reminder of that tonight, even in a loss. So, all that said, we'll end the podcast now. But that was a weird one for the Hawks. And now they have a pretty interesting road trip coming up. We'll have more on this probably tomorrow on the show. I'm planning to do a podcast tomorrow. But the Hawks actually go to Toronto on Wednesday and on Friday for the first sort of mini series of the season. And the There was some reporting today on Siakam and Anunoby and trade stuff, which kind of folds into all what's going on there. We'll touch on the show tomorrow, but the Raptors are not playing very well. They've actually lost 4 games in a row. The Hawks have actually have almost the same record as the Raptors right now. So let's just say this: the Hawks have to get at least one of these, if not both. I think they're better than the Raptors. We'll see if that's true in a couple of days, but certainly games that they're going to have to win, and there will not be the excuse of a team that's better than you. Like, they're playing a team in the Raptors that is comparable or that is worse than them, so they cannot afford to lose both these games. And hopefully, if you're the Hawks, get both these wins on the road on Wednesday and Friday. We'll have more on that though coming up in the future. Also, at the end of the podcast, I should tell you, if you are already a subscriber, you might see some bonus podcast content in our audio-only feeds at Spotify and Apple, etc., from the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast. That should be there in your feeds for some bonus content. As a reminder, I am not doing any less. I'm still going to be here 4 or 5 times a week, so don't be distressed. But if you have interest in listening to some extra content, it will be there on the audio-only feeds. YouTube, it's just me, so apologies on that. But please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. Please leave 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify if you can. But please tell a friend about the show as well. If you are a listener that is dedicated to the show, first of all, I very much appreciate that. And second of all, please help us to spread the word to other Hawks fans that you may know, whether it's your family or friends, etc. I would really appreciate a share or something like that to help spread the word about the podcast. Also, write about the Hawks at patreon.com/BTRowland. And you can follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. I appreciate everybody listening to the show as always. We'll have a podcast planned for tomorrow, and then we'll be back again with more later on in the week after the games on Friday and Wednesday, of course. Stay tuned, and we'll see you all next time.